All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going deep into Wicked.
Ooh, love it.
But not just any old Wicked analysis. We've got excerpts, some scholarly stuff, looking at Madame Morrible's views on art.
Interesting.
And it gets pretty wild thinking about how art gets used, for control, for rebellion, even in Oz.
Right, because even in a fantasy world, art has power.
Totally. And Madame Morrible, she's right at the center of it all.
Headmistress of Shiz, mentor to Elphaba and Glinda, but also tied up with the wizard's whole propaganda thing.
Yeah. Makes you wonder whose side she's really on, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Especially when you see this quote from the article. Hold on. It's, one expects poetry, if it is poetry, to offend.
Whoa. It is a right of art. Strong words.
Right. Coming from someone so deep in the system, is she serious about this right to offend, or is it all a game?
It's like she's saying, rebel sure, but only in the ways I allow.
Like a safety valve. Let the steam out a little bit. So
It doesn't blow the whole thing up.
Exactly. And the article compares Morrible to, remember Goethe.
Yeah, of course. Whatever is truly worthwhile.
Is sure to meet with opposition. Both talk about art shaking things up, but
Goethe celebrates it. Morrible wants to manage it. What does that tell us?
a lot about where their hearts lie, I think. Control versus freedom.
Okay, so we've got this tension, right? Freedom versus control. But how does that actually play out in Oz? I mean, the wizard loves a good spectacle.
Oh yeah, he's all about the smoke and mirrors, the booming voice.
Giant head, the whole deal. It's like a rock concert designed to make you obey.
Absolutely. Pure sensory overload to create this illusion of power.
And even if you haven't read Wicked, you've seen this, right? Ads, politicians, all trying to use flashy stuff to sway you.
Exactly. It's all propaganda, just with different packaging.
But it's not just the wizard, right? Morrible herself, she's amazing with language, especially when it comes to Elphaba.
Oh, totally. I mean, she's the one who brands Elphaba as wicked in the first place.
And that sticks with her, like, forever. It defines her before she even has a chance.
To tell her own story. That's the power of language. It shapes how we see the world.
And Oz is full of it, right? Statues, symbols of the wizard everywhere, like visual propaganda.
Absolutely. Those giant statues in the Emerald City, they're not just decorations, they're constant reminders of his power. Makes it tough to even imagine a world without him.
So we've got spectacle from the wizard, language from Morrible, both used for control. But then there's Elphaba's magic. The article talks about that as a form of rebellion.
Now that's where things get really fascinating. Her magic, it's raw, untamed, right? So different from the controlled kind they teach at Shiz.
It's almost like, is it a coincidence that the girl who rebels also have the wildest magic?
I think the article's saying, no, it's not. Her magic is a metaphor for real art, something powerful that can't be controlled.
So you've got the wizard and Morrible, all about control, and Elphaba, this untamable force.
Exactly. And, real art is often like that, too. It shakes things up, makes people uncomfortable, which actually
is what Morrible said art is supposed to do. But I bet she didn't quite have this in mind.
Probably not. But that's the thing about art. It has a way of escaping the boxes we try to put it in. And in Elphaba's case, that escape is going to change everything.
Okay, so where were we? Oh, yeah, Madame Morrible. Such a tricky character, right? Not exactly evil, but definitely playing some kind of power game.
Yeah, it's not like she's the wizard calling all the shots, but she's not some helpless bystander either.
The article actually calls her an emblem of power, propaganda, and the weaponization of language.
Whoa!
Yeah, intense, right? Makes you think, where do her loyalties really lie? She's part of the system, benefits from it, but
you get the feeling she's got her own plans, her own agenda. Like she's trying to walk this line.
holding on to power while still pulling strings behind the scenes.
And art becomes her tool, right? A way to manipulate people, to shape the story in her favor.
Which, brings us back to that whole right to offend thing.
Oh, right.
It makes me think, is she actually for artistic freedom? Or is it all just a way to control things, to let people vent a little,
So they don't cause real trouble. The article even uses the word pressure valve, which I thought was interesting.
So she's basically saying, be critical, sure, but don't go too far.
Yeah, within the limits she sets. And it makes you wonder, does she really believe in the power of art to challenge things? Or is it just another way for her to stay in control?
It's almost like she's afraid of true artistic freedom. Like, what would happen if people really let loose?
Right, and remember, Morrible's climbed pretty high in this system. It makes sense she wouldn't want to rock the boat too much.
Okay, so we've got Morrible as this manipulator, right? using art to keep things under control. But then there's Elphaba. She doesn't just rebel with magic. She takes that word wicked and
Don't it?
yeah, it's like Morrible tries to use it to shame her, to make her an outcast, and Elphaba's like, nope, this is me, deal with it.
Such a powerful move. It's like saying, you can't control me with your labels. She takes that word and turns it into a symbol of defiance.
It makes me think of all the times people have done that in the real world, taking a word that was used against them and making it their own.
Totally. Like reclaiming power. And it reminds us we don't have to accept the labels others try to put on us.
This makes me think about art in social movements. Think about music, posters, fashion, all being used to challenge injustice.
It's about taking back control of the narrative, not letting those in power define who you are, what you stand for.
And speaking of taking back control, we can't forget about the winged monkeys. The article talks about their liberation as like the ultimate example of art breaking free.
Oh yeah, they're literally enslaved, forced to wear those golden caps that control their minds.
And Elphaba, through her magic, her compassion, she sets them free.
And it's not just about breaking physical chains, right? It's about breaking free from mental control, from oppression.
And this is something we see throughout history, right? Artists using their work to fight tyranny, to give a voice to the voiceless.
Absolutely. Art can be a weapon against injustice, a way to inspire hope. So powerful.
Okay, so we've got all of these examples of art being used for control and rebellion. But it's not always so clear-cut, right? Like the article says, power in Oz is more complicated than just good versus evil.
Yeah, the article talks about different categories of characters, like the oppressors, the oppressed, and then those in between.
Like Morrible, she benefits from the system, but she's also kind of stuck in it,
Right. And this is something we see in the real world, too. Think about people working for companies doing harmful things, or living in countries with oppressive governments. They may not be the ones in charge, but...
You're still part of the system. Even if they don't like it, it's hard to escape.
Exactly. And that's what makes Wicked so interesting, right? It makes us think about these messy situations where it's not always easy to say who's good and who's bad.
So it's not enough to just label people. We have to look at the systems they're in, the choices they make.
And Wicked pushes us to do that. Makes us confront these tough questions about power, morality, and what it means to be complicit.
All right, so we've talked a lot about how art is used in Oz, but let's step back. What can we learn from this fantasy world about art in our society?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that art is never neutral. It always has meaning, it reflects values, and it can change how we think and act, even if we don't realize it.
So it's not just about pretty pictures or catchy songs. Art can actually shape how we see the world.
For sure. Which is why we need to be careful, to think critically about the art we consume. Ask ourselves, who made this? What are they trying to say, and why?
Because even something as simple as a statue can have a whole lot of meaning behind it, right? History, messages.
Absolutely. And it's up to us to dig deeper, to understand the context, and to think about the impact that art is having on us.
And it's not just about being critical, right? It's also about supporting artists who are doing good work, using their art to make a positive difference.
I couldn't agree more. We should support those who are speaking truth to power, fighting for justice, and making the world a better place.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, there's so much more we could unpack.
And speaking of unpacking, we've talked a lot about the right of art to offend, but what about the artist's responsibility?
Now that's the real question, isn't it? Because if art can be so powerful, then those who create it have to be careful, right?
So it's not just about what you make, but also why you make it and what impact you want it to have on the world.
Exactly. It's about thinking about your audience, your message, and the potential consequences of your work.
Which brings us back to Morrible, right? She gets the power of art, but she mainly uses it for her own gain to help the wizard keep control.
A perfect example of how art can be misused. And it reminds us to be aware, to question the motivations behind the art we see, and to support those who are using their art for good.
So it's not just on the artists to be responsible. It's on all of us, the audience, to engage with art thoughtfully, critically.
To ask questions, to challenge assumptions, to see things from different perspectives. Because art can be used for good or bad, and we have a role to play in making sure it's used to build a better world.
Well said. Thinking about all this makes me appreciate just how deep Wicked really is. It's not just a fantasy story, it's a story that makes us think about power, about morality, about the choices we make.
And the role of art in all of it.
And it reminds us that these aren't just questions for fictional characters, they're questions we face in our own lives. We're all consumers of art, and in a way, we're all creators too. Every choice we make, every action we take, it's a form of expression, right?
It really is. We all have the power to shape the world around us.
So maybe the real takeaway is that we all have a responsibility to use our creativity, our choices, our voices to make the world a better place.
Absolutely. Whether we're artists or activists or just everyday people trying to make a difference, we can all use our power for good.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Wicked, the power of art, and the responsibility we all share in shaping the world. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have.
Me too. It's been a great exploration.
We've wrestled with some tough questions, but hopefully come away with a better understanding of how art can be a force for change, both positive and negative. It's not just about the art itself, but about the intentions behind it, how it's received, and the choices we make. So go out there, engage with art critically, thoughtfully, and use your own creative power to make the world a more beautiful, just, and compassionate place.
And until next time, keep those deep dives going.
We've been talking about Wicked, about how art is used for control, for rebellion, but now I'm thinking about the artist's side of things. If art can offend, should it? Is there a responsibility there?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Artists, philosophers, they've been debating that forever. Like, how do you balance freedom of expression with the fact that art can really impact the world?
It's like we were saying about the wizard's spectacle, right? It's propaganda, but it's also art. So art can be used to manipulate, just like it can be used to inspire.
Totally. It can shape how we see things, what we believe, even make us do things. Think about music, how it makes you feel, or a powerful image. It can change your whole perspective.
Like when Elphaba yells no to the wizard and embraces being wicked. It's powerful because it's not just her story, it's everyone who's been told they're different, that they don't belong.
Right. It gives them permission to be themselves, to fight back. And that's why the artist's responsibility is so important. If art has that much power, you got to use it carefully.
So it's not just what you create, but why and what you hope it'll do, right?
Exactly. You have to think, what am I trying to say? Who am I talking to? What kind of impact do I want to have? Because people will interpret things differently.
And it makes me think about Morrible again. She gets art, she uses it. But it's all about her own power, helping the wizard stay in control. Not about truth or justice or anything like that.
Yeah, it shows how easily art can be twisted, used for bad as much as good, which is why we, the audience, have to think critically too.
Not just let anything wash over us, right? We got to question things, look at the artist's motives.
Support the ones who are using their art for good, to fight for what's right. Because art can be a tool to make the world better, but it takes effort from everyone.
Thinking about all this makes Wicked even more interesting. It's not just a fun story. It makes you think about power, about what's right and wrong, the choices we make.
And art's role in all of that.
It shows us these aren't just things fictional characters deal with. They're in our world, too. We all experience art, and in a way, we all create it, too, right? Every choice, every action, it shapes the world around us.
That's a really cool way to think about it. We all have that power to create, to impact things.
So I guess the big takeaway is we got to use that power well to make things better, to be kind, to fight for what we believe in, whether we're artists or just living our lives.
You can all make a difference.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Wicked, the power of art, and all the responsibility that comes with it. It's been an amazing conversation, really making me think. We've explored some tough questions, but hopefully we all have a better understanding of how art can change the world. And it's not just the art itself, but the intentions, the impact, the choices we all make. So keep thinking critically, keep those conversations going, and use your own creativity to make the world a more beautiful, just, and compassionate place.